I'm Raj Kumar, President and Editor-in-Chief of Devex. We're here at the Clinton Global Initiative and honored to have one of the candidates for Secretary General of the United Nations, Natalia Gherman, who is here as a candidate from Moldova. You were the Deputy Prime Minister until very recently, the Foreign Minister, you were in charge of European integration, and now you are here at the UN General Assembly meeting with all of the various countries that will have a stake in this process. How is the campaign going so far?
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I feel that the process has been very rewarding for me, both personally and professionally, because the transparency and inclusiveness of the process this time is actually conducive to a great dialogue between the candidates, the governments, the civil society, the private sector and the international media. And it gave me and other candidates great opportunities to carry our message across, but I for one never forget to ask my audiences what are the expectations that they have for the next UN Secretary General, and also what kind of recommendations they could provide for me. And throughout the process, of course, the platform and the vision was fine-tuned, and I'm absolutely sure that at the end of this very rewarding process, I'm even better prepared for the job, provided that I'm the next UN Secretary General.
Well, thank you for that. And as you know, our audience are development professionals, humanitarian professionals, people who work in global health. What is your message to them? What would a Secretary General administration for you actually mean for our community?
Of course, the job of the next Secretary General, as was the job for all previous Secretaries General, would be absolutely demanding. And the world, unfortunately, today is not a more secure or safer place that we all were hoping for. And some of the priorities that I put forward, of course, would relate to the traditional field of international peace and security, where I would like to change the focus in favor of the culture of prevention and prioritize that. But I would also, of course, look into the issue of countering the menace of international terrorism, dealing with the radicalization of our societies, violent extremism. I would look into the way we could improve, make more efficient the peacekeeping activity of the organization, and also look into the human trafficking and illicit drugs. But obviously, for the kind of the audience and stakeholders that you have in Devex, it would be interesting to learn that I do prioritize the field of sustainable development, and that this time we are more fortunate than even a couple of years ago, because last year we have obtained an incredible achievement in the form of Agenda 2030.
The global goals.
With the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and many more targets. And I have contributed in my capacity as Moldova's Foreign Minister to what is now goal number 16. That sounds like some responsible institutions at the service of the citizens, rule of law and good governance, because I was conducting the intergovernmental dialogue in the UN system for the last 2 years. And I would, of course, embrace all goals and targets in their entirety, and I am very much advocating for the holistic approach. But I think that the rule of law and good governance should be omnipresent, horizontal, and transcending absolutely all goals, because this is the way our effort on implementing the agenda would be sustainable. And I would also, of course, pay attention to consolidating the old partnerships and building new partnerships in this very important effort. And this is how your community can be very helpful, because I think that this agenda has to be domesticated now in a thorough way, back home in our national governments, and the United Nations should be at the service and be that convening platform for the governments to share their best experiences, ask for assistance, and making sure that this exchange is going on in an unprecedented before way. But I would also reach out more actively to the civil society, to our partners who knows the problems in the respective communities at the grassroots level, because the community leaders, the female leaders, the religious leaders, youth leaders, they are fantastic partners in this endeavor, and they should be involved more actively. So I'm used to working with civil society on a daily basis back home, and we've been benefiting in a great way from their expertise, their resources, and their commitment. I don't think we were able to build a new modern democratic state from scratch starting 25 years ago in the Republic of Moldova if we did not rely on our civil society, non-governmental partners. They do criticize the governments, which is, I think, is a very healthy way to do and to expect, but they also commit a lot of knowledge and a lot of dedication to that. I, for one, would institute a liaison office of the global civil society in the private office of the Secretary General if I'm elected, because I know to interact with them personally, and I know what great solutions that they can bring to solving issues, be it from the very vast field of climate change, and again we are fortunate because we have the Paris Climate Agreement this time, which we have to now ratify and start implementing, empowerment of women in our societies, access to quality education and health. So I wouldn't even stop short by mentioning that some parts of the world are still experiencing the level of extreme poverty. Right. My own country started with a level of extreme poverty 25 years ago. And I'm very proud to say that we've reached, albeit recently, the level of middle-income country. Right. So that status was not easy to obtain. But at the same time, I do know the challenges of international development firsthand. And I'm sure that the experience that I've accumulated at the service of my own country will be very useful when I'm trying to implement the same ways and practices and lessons learned all over the world together with my partners. But I would like to also to mention that I'm in favor and I'm committed to reaching a new level of partnership with the private sector, with the corporate sector, because they are there with their resources and with technology. And I do think that we cannot count on more resources in order to implement the ambitious goals in the development and humanitarian field without the private sector. So the corporate field uses important practices on how to make the activity of their organizations more efficient, cost-effective. This is exactly what UN needs at present.
I was going to ask you about the agencies themselves. Is that what you think that's required?
To deliver much better on the objectives that we set in front of us, and making the agencies, the funds, the programs more efficient, more purpose-oriented, without duplication of efforts, dividing the labor between all regional partners and organizations in a well-structured and logical way. This would be a very important task for UN and for its new Secretary General ahead. And I'm also in favor of introducing technology into the UN, because this is how we can make it relevant back again for all the citizens of the world, and most importantly for youth.
Because it shouldn't be a radical idea, but it sounds like you think there's a big need there.
And actually I'm placing youth as an important part of my vision and my platform, because I think the potential of millennials, for example, is not yet exploited, and they are there eager to help, eager to get involved. And I'm referring to the youth, not as leaders of tomorrow, as the general template would go, but as leaders of today. And it is up to us to empower them to work in their respective communities on the issues such as inequality, because I think inequality to some extent is the mother of all evil in so many of our societies.
A lot comes from that, absolutely.
That leads to radicalization very often, and to other bad phenomena. But engaging youth means going step in step and pace in pace with them. Make sure that we obtain information, we share information exactly that they do, and we engage them. And I'm absolutely sure that we have to understand that young people today, they're not as much into possessing things, services, as they are in the desire to access things. So it's not about possessing, but about accessing things and about sharing them. And this is how technology can be useful, but it also requires a shift of the mentality. If we engage them, if we engage women as half of the population of the world, and younger generation into delivering on peace and security, delivering on sustainable development agenda, delivering on humanitarian responses, then I'm sure we can translate it into ownership. And if we have this ownership, for me, this is a recipe for success.
Many of the people I talk to want to know, will we have a Secretary General who focuses inward on the institution and helps to reform it, make it better, or will we have one who's more of an external leader? How would you describe yourself in that regard? Should we expect you to be more engaged with the institution itself or more engaged as a global leader on these issues? Give us an idea.
You can expect me to be both, because I know in order to be attractive as an organization and regain respect and relevance for the United Nations, which is my aim and my task, we need to deliver on behalf of organization much better. So it has to be delivering perhaps more for less, and certain practices would need to be changed. I am in favor of a healthy dose of disruption even, because I'm a candidate from outside the system,
Right.
and I know exactly what needs to be done, because for 25 years I was at the other side as a contributor from national government perspective, but also as a client. So I see very well what works well, what doesn't work well, and what would be healthy to be changed. But I am in favor of some healthy dose of disruption with innovation to follow after this. So you need to do it for a purpose. And I am the candidate who would like to see innovation as a result of the healthy dose of disruption, for example. Over here, I mean, most importantly, the accountability of the United Nations as a system, as an organization, of transparency into the system. So each government, its citizens would like to know where the funds are being spent, how the funds are being spent, and what is the result out of it. I would also actually implement real zero tolerance policy towards waste and mismanagement, and obviously the highest degree of integrity should come from the Secretary General herself or himself, and then you have the moral right to demand it from people who work for you and from people whom you recruit to work for the organization. So, and I would implement this reform of the organization on 3 levels. So the level of policy, management, and governance. So I have very good ideas about that. I think change is possible. It's exactly the way we are changing our national environments. So it's not a revolutionary, maybe an evolutionary change. But someone has to start doing it because this organization is the only still collective commitment of humanity to work together in order to improve the life of our citizens all around the world. And we need to make it functional, right, operational, relevant, and
some people love to hate the UN, but we need the UN.
And being respected back again, because I think the respect towards the organization should be regained by the organization delivering on the expectations of the humanity. And you have to start bringing the house in order to prove that it can be much better. And then, of course, it's much easier and much more convincing to do the global outreach. Right. And the partnerships that I was talking about is exactly that thing. You have to be a credible partner yourself in order to commit to new relationships and new partnerships and consolidate the existing ones. This is exactly how I see it. And I do count on those extraordinary stakeholders that you have in your convening platform over here. So people who are working on international development from all those different points of view, and people who work in the humanitarian field. The World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul this year was probably a very good attempt to combine the work on development with the work on the humanitarian issues. This is the right approach. I don't think we can separate actually peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights for that matter. And I am in favor of that particular field of activity of the UN to be transcending, and actually I am of the opinion that there is no peace and security without development. There is no development without security. Right. And there is nothing without human rights and human dignity, because this is why we all are working together. We have to ensure that the standards of human dignity are well known, understood, promoted and defended in our respective societies. Even from this particular point of view, I don't think there is a better placed organization than the United Nations in the world. And this is one more very important field where I would concentrate my own efforts and the efforts of the great professionals that work in the system.
Do you think it's important, we have the conventional wisdom today says we're going to have a Eastern European candidate likely to come through the process, and very possibly a woman. Do you think it's important that this be a woman, that we break that glass ceiling? How important should we think of that, and would you like the countries who are involved in this process to take it?
If you ask me what is the most important criteria for the selection of the next Secretary General, well, I would say that the professionalism, relevant skills, experience, in other words, meritocracy, should be the number one criteria. And I'm very happy to state that the female candidates who are participating in the race this year are all absolutely distinguished professionals in the very important and relevant fields for the activity of the United Nations in the world. I also happen to be an Eastern European, so I would advocate very much that this time it might actually be the turn of Eastern Europe to have this great honor, to have a Secretary General who comes from Eastern Europe. And I would support wholeheartedly what you said, that there is an expectation of an even broader group of citizens, countries, communities all around the world, that the next Secretary General might be a woman. Yeah. So in 71 years of existence of the United Nations, there was never a woman Secretary General of the UN. I think it's about time. Yeah. I think the best proof of our commitment to gender equality would be the selection of a woman as next UN Secretary General, and UN as the role model in so many instances should definitely lead by example and actually inspire the national governments to empower women to take leading positions in business, in politics, in social field, absolutely everywhere. And I think that women are natural pacifiers too, agents of change, but actually instinctively working for sustainability in absolutely all areas. And a huge potential that this attitude brings to work on peace and security, development, human rights could hardly be overestimated. We are more than 50% of the global population, and yet we are still very far from real gender equality, from empowerment of women in many fields of our societal life, and actually from using this fantastic resource that is readily available, even from the point of view of making the United Nations and our national governments much more efficient, delivering much more better on a sustainable basis. So yes, I'm in favor of a woman as next UN Secretary General.
Okay, good to hear that. And we're entering a new phase in the campaign. I want to wrap up on this question. On Monday, there will be another straw poll vote And then very soon, into October, there will be the introduction of these red cards where countries can veto the process, veto candidates in the process. Things are about to shift a bit. In the end, it's really going to be about the P5 countries, right? Coming together around a candidate, countries like Russia and the United States and others agreeing. As you as a candidate, what is it like for you? Give us a little bit of a sense of what the process is like behind the scenes as you try to campaign at this international level and where you see it going from here.
I am sure that it is worth campaigning up until the very last stage and until the very last day of the campaign before the final decision is being taken. First, as I said at the beginning, it's an absolutely rewarding process. It's a process that includes so many stakeholders, and it's good for the United Nations itself, apart from the fact that it is good for the candidates, because we are learning and enriching ourselves very much, and I'm enjoying it tremendously. But there is also a great a feeling that some of the vote that is going on is tactical at this stage as well. I completely understand. So UN is an organization of the member states, and there are only 15 member states elected to the Security Council, so 5 permanent, 10 non-permanent members of the Council. This is also quite a geopolitical exercise as well.
Right.
So if it is a top diplomatic job, then of course the diplomacy and all the instruments that exist in international relations field are being used by definition, even at the process of selection of the UN Secretary General. So if you see how vote changes in between the straw polls, so you can very well understand that
there's a lot of variation.
Exactly, and there's a lot of tactical voting. And so that should probably determines us, the candidates, to campaign and to fight until the very end. You're absolutely right that in October the red-colored bulletins or cards would be introduced. That might change the dynamics of the voting process quite a bit, since the permanent 5 members would be exercising their right to veto the candidates. So if you ask me, I am absolutely sure that a candidate with the highest degree of acceptability to the permanent members of the Security Council will be ultimately elected. And I hope to believe that I have this highest degree of acceptability for all 5. So that means that I hope the end of the exercise will be positive and successful for me. So I hope to be the next UN Secretary General.
Well, it is a race we are going to be following very closely.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and speak with our audience today.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure for me as well.